Hello, welcome to week 3 of Print Month and our visit to the studio of Mixografia. I am Jenny Gibbs, Executive Director of the IFPDA and the IFPDA Foundation. Print Month is held each year in conjunction with the IFPDA Fine Art Print Fair, which is currently on view on Artsy through November 1st. Today is the third in our series of 5 visits with some of the more than 30 fine art print publishers among the members of the IFPDA. I hope you'll also join us on Thursday for our visit with Valerie Wade and the master printers at Crown Point Press in San Francisco. Today we have the pleasure of visiting with Shaye Remba and the master printers at Mixografia in Los Angeles to learn more about their iconic work with artists such as Rufino Tamayo and Ed Ruscha and their patented technique for creating Mixografia prints. We have the Q&A open throughout our visit. If you have a question, please type it in the Q&A box. And with that, I'm handing off the Zoom baton to Shaye.
Hi, hello everybody. First of all, I would like to welcome you all virtually. And also I want to thank Jenny Gibb and Shari Young for helping us organize this event, as well as the IFPDA Print Fair Committee for their efforts organizing the IFPDA Print Month. Well, today I am going to talk about what happens here in Mixografia, what is a Mixografia, how we print, some of the experiences we've had with the artist, and show you some of the artworks we have produced in collaboration with different artists throughout our history. But, well, this is a slide that shows our print show. But first, I would like to start by telling you how we define a Mixografia. And for that, I am going to use a print that we produced with Analia Saban in her series, Paper or Plastic. And this series is about plastic bags with different slogans, all of them very colorful and optimistic, and they dwell with the notion of commerce, the interchanging goods. Here in California, for many years, we've had a plastic bag ban, so part of her commentaries now these all common objects now even belong in a museum. And I am using this example because the Mixografia, we define it as a three-dimensional printing process. And by three-dimensional, we say high relief, which you can see in this print. Now, you can see here, this is the back of the print. So this shows you the level of relief or bas relief that can be achieved with the printing process. So we are talking about the high relief, but also we talk about fine surface detail. This print by British artist Jason Martin shows us that this has very high relief, and you see those lines, and a close-up, you know, you have the grain of the sand that he used to create his concept. And this is what defines a Mixografia. There are different ways to achieve that, and we will talk more about that later. In this print by Ed Ruscha from his series Ross Designs, he used a corroded steel plate, but if we look close to it, we can see, if we look at this close-up, we can see all the crust, all the grain from the corrosion that had a plate that was translated into the surface of the paper. So that's how we define a mixografia, a three-dimensional print where the three-dimensionality is the high relief and the fine surface detail. Now, how did this happen? I am going to now talk about the history of the workshop. These are my parents who founded the workshop in Mexico City in the late 60s. And this happened in the Plaza de Santo Domingo. So this is a square close to the Zócalo, which is the main plaza in downtown Mexico City. There is a very important Dominican church in the plaza. It was the old custom houses and the School of Medicine that before that happened to be the Inquisition. And because of the custom house and all the school, you know, they needed printmakers in that area to print books, to print scribes to write letters. So traditionally in that area, in those arches, existed these businesses since the 18th century. And you know, this is a tradition that still exists today, where between the arches you have these little stalls with a little hand press with a few sets of typesets, and they are still printing invitations or announcements, or for the graduates, college graduates, they need to print a thesis, and this is still happening there. And it happens that my grandfather bought a business there in the 40s. And later on, my father joined the business in the early 50s, and he was a commercial printer for many, many years in his life. When we were kids, we used to travel around Mexico City. This is Teotihuacan, one of the most important pre-Columbian sites close to Mexico City. The scale of the pyramids is amazing. So my parents used to collect pre-Columbian art. At that time, you can go to the little towns, and the people, the farmers, would find pieces of clay, stone, and people could buy them without any problem. So my parents loved to collect pre-Columbian art and all that sense of exploration. Let's see what we can find this weekend. And one time, close to this place, somebody told them that besides pre-Columbian art, they had some paintings. So my parents were curious, okay, let's see what the paintings are. And the first painting that this farmer pulled was a Diego Rivera. So my parents couldn't believe that. How come in this town, small town in the middle of nowhere, there is this person that has a Diego Rivera? So this person explained that he was a mason and that he used to help Diego prepare the walls for his murals, and that he helped him for many years. And Diego, in order to thank him, gave him a few paintings, and that this was the last one, and that he wouldn't sell it, but that he could sell him this painting. So this painting is by Pablo Higgins, who was an American artist born in Salt Lake City in 1904. And his childhood, he spent it in California by the border in El Cajon. And he loved the Mexican culture and decided to move to Mexico City and become a muralist. So when my parents learned about Pablo Higgins, they saw this painting, they purchased it and decided to take it to Pablo to restore it. So Pablo was very happy to, well, this is, by the way, this is his self-portrait. Pablo was very happy to see the painting. And because of that, my parents and Pablo and her wife, Maria, started a friendship. So when Pablo learned that my father was a commercial printmaker, he asked him if he could print his catalog for the retrospective that he was going to have at the Palacio de Bellas Artes, one of the most important museums in Mexico, in downtown. So my father agreed, and since Pablo liked what he saw, the quality of the catalog, he proposed to my father, why don't you start printing lithographs? And Pablo happened to be one of the founders of Taller de Gráfica Popular, which is the People Graphic Arts Workshop that was one of the most important print workshops probably even in the world at that time. They were very ideological to the left, and it was, besides a print shop, a forum to exchange, all their socio-political perspective. And unfortunately, the Taller de Gráfica Popular, the artists, they had other interests, took other directions, and in the early 60s, it totally dwindled down. There was not that much energy and production as in the 40s or during the Second World War. So since Pablo was one of the founders, he wanted to keep alive that tradition. And he asked my father then to see if he would be interested. So he introduced my father to this man to the right, Jose Sanchez, who used to be the lithograph printer at the Taller de Gráfica Popular. And unfortunately, he had an accident with a commercial machinery and lost a hand. But when he was young, he could still print without a hand, with a special hook and device doing the plates or stones. So and with my father, they fixed some of the machines, and they managed to print for Pablo, who is on the left, some lithographs like this one. And that brought the opening of the workshop, which was called Taller de Gráfica Mexicana in Mexico City, 1973. And many artists came to work, the leading artists from that time in Mexico. But what really started the Mixografia was Rufino Tamayo, who by that time, what we call the three greats, Siqueiros, Orozco, Rivera, had passed away. So this was a newer generation without so many socio-political aspirations. And Tamayo had already a very long career in the international arena. So Tamayo challenged my father to develop a process that could incorporate volume and texture in printmaking, something that he hadn't done with his experience printing in New York, here in Los Angeles, in Paris. So he wanted something new for printmaking. And after several months of development, this became the first Mixografia monologue. And this was a print done on arch paper, a commercial paper. So after this print, there was a very long collaboration with Tamayo. This is another print we created. He took many topics, developed many ideas. And technically also the challenges became more difficult, like we had to develop a handmade paper. Here you see this is what is called the Hollander bitter, which is used to create to make the pulp for paper. This was the one we had in Mexico City. And this is the first print we did on handmade paper. And you see the textures are deeper. There are, and this was something that the commercial paper couldn't take. It would break because of the tremendous pressure that you need to put on its surface in order there to mark the surface on the paper. So this is the first Mixografia on handmade paper. Tamayo also liked to combine techniques. In this case, this is a Mixografia and stone lithography, frutero con manzanas, a bowl with apples, which combine both techniques. But the most challenging print became two people chased by dogs. And this is a stone that, Tamayo wanted to do a mural, a really large print. So my father had to find a stone that could be used for that. Of course, the German quarries couldn't provide a stone. So we had to find a Mexican stone that could be used as a litho stone. So this is a marble from Baja California. And we see here Tamayo working on the stone. And this is when he finished drawing it after several months of work. Also, they had to build all this crane to be able to stand the stone because otherwise he couldn't work. And here we see the master printers inking and printing on the stone, which, as I'm sure you can see, is not an easy thing to do because of the size and keeping the surface moist. And well, here they are lifting the print. And this is a photograph of just the image on lithography, you know, the main element of the print, which later, you know, they had a texture for the Mixografia, and they are inking all the colors on that plate. So what they did after the lithograph was printed, they inked this plate, then they placed the already printed paper on top of this plate and run it to the press, and the paper picked up the colors, and this is a finished print, which measures 5 by 9 feet. So this was quite a challenge, but it was successfully done. And if you see here in the back, you can see we kept the stone as part of our archive. Now, during that time, we started to contact, invite American artists, and in Mexico, we had the honor to collaborate with Kenneth Noland. Here we see him working on his monoprint series called Winds. He spent like 3 weeks in Mexico City, and this is one of the prints he did. Also, during that time, Larry Rivers had a home in Zihuatanejo on the Pacific coast, and he used to come several weeks a year. So my parents contacted him there, and he came to the shop in Mexico, and he created this relief, which was done in not directly as a mixografia, more like a lithograph layer at different levels. This is a friend of him showing the collection that she did over her lifetime, and it has to do with the things that happened to him in his daily life. So during this time, we start to have some associations here with artists in the States, and because of a show that we had at UCLA in the 1983, Robert Gray, the then dean of the art department of UCLA, suggested a collaboration between UCLA and Mixografia. And the idea was for them to invite artists to lecture at the art department. And since the lecture would take a few hours in order to keep them busy, also we would invite them to develop a project in Mixografia during that time. So everybody was very enthusiastic about the project, and by the time we built new machinery and moved, he left the department, and that unfortunately that program didn't happen, but we already were on our way to Los Angeles. One of the first projects we worked on here in LA was with Helen Frankenthaler. She did a series of 5 prints and 1 casting. And here she had the opportunity to work with, because of the physicality of the prints, she had the opportunity to work with materials she hadn't worked before, like plasters, wax, different pneumatic tools, which she really enjoyed. And part of the group of prints that she produced during that time is this print called Hermes. This is a 48 by 96 inch print. And the surface that she created was using melted wax. And that's why you have these like very loose and spontaneous brushstrokes on the surface of the print. And also by using wax, she had the opportunity to move it around when it was melted, as if it, or emulating the way the paint would move on the surface of her canvas. But here, because it's wax, it was thicker, it created a little bit of a surface. Also, we had the honor to work with Louise Bourgeois in a project in which we collaborated with Judy Solotkin of Solo Press. And here are my parents with Louise Bourgeois at her studio with one of the prints. So what she did, she used twine and used it as a drawing, but at the end the print ended being something in between print and sculpture because of the relief, something also very spontaneous. You know, this is a close-up of the print, and you see how the twine protrudes out of the surface, but in reality it's the paper, you know, with the red color ink that is typical of many of her prints and drawings. And she, well, I will jump to the next work. Next artist, this is Tom Wesselman, which also we had a very nice collaboration. And for us, this was important because we had always worked with materials and with more organic surfaces. And suddenly we had to work on very flat, dense color surface. So that gave us the opportunity to try new things. And for him, which had done laser cuts, many laser cuts, this also was in between paper and the laser cut, incorporate those elements that he couldn't integrate in the silk screen for that we know that he was very prolific, you know, with his graphic work, other graphic prints as well. John Baldessari, we had a very long relationship with him, not just as collaborators, but also we had a very nice friendship. Unfortunately, he passed away early this year, but also he propelled us in many directions and to experiment in different ways. He took full advantage of the sculptural and multimedia possibilities of the technique. Because of him, we integrated the photography into mixografia, like in this case of Stonehenge with two persons. And this is a series where it's the same, basically the same image, but by changing the color on each element and the levels of each element creates a very vibrant body of work where nothing is really stable. But you know, that was his idea. He didn't want to give the full image. He wanted us to really really jump into the artwork and explore and imagine the faces, or where these people, what were they doing. John, well, this is when he was signing the prints at his studio. Also, we did this very large project, the ABC Art Low Relief, the keyboard, which incorporates 26 images that he had used in his body of work, but instead of using photography, he decided to use the objects themselves. So for us was like became like a scavenger hunt to find the objects, either from toy shops, anatomical supply shops, the supermarket, or create the images, and of course always under his supervision. And at the end, this became one of the most satisfying projects, you know, to be involved with. Now, another interesting project was a collaboration with Jorge Pardo, where he wanted to create a print that deals with light. So he decided that in order for the print to reflect light, we would need to gild it. And in order to project light, we would need to create some things so that in the windows it would project the light. So that involved a lot of development, and we ended up gilding the print with 22 karat gold, which in itself became a challenge because, you know, paper is very soft. So there are many things that we couldn't do because of the softness. And also we had to make this light box very thin because he wanted it to look like a very traditional print. So that's why it has the deckledge and the border, and it encompasses his notion of painting, sculpture, design. This refers to two doors, really. This is a diptych. Now, another artist with whom we've had a very close relationship is with Ed Rocher. And here we see him working on New Wood, Old Wood. He brought us one plank that he found in his ranch close to Big Bear here in California. And he said, hey, I want to work with this, and I want it to look old and new at the same time. So we prepared the molds that you see, the gray parts that Ed is working on. And those were like soft models of the plank, which he flattened, let's say, for the upper part in this photograph. And in the bottom one, he aged it, and by opening the crack and warping. And this was the idea that the way he wanted to transmit the passing of time, which is a concern of his. And here, this is a close-up. You see, like, it's the same plank. You know, the knots are the same, but by inking in different ways, we achieve what he wanted. You know, one is a new wood, old wood. Which one is the new one? Is probably the new one is the old one because it's in its current state. And also the notion, this is, we make paper out of wood, but now we are making wood out of paper. So there is this dichotomy in this artwork. Also another project we work on, and we are very honored, is was to print a ghost station, which, you know, is part of one of his iconic images, the standard station. But in this print is totally devoid of color, which, you know, it's really the essence of the standard station. You know, the image is produced by the light and shadow is the ghost. Another interesting project in which we collaborated was with Abraham Cruz Villegas, a Mexican artist. You see he's holding a Mexican bill, which he used to create this artwork. For us was interesting the notion of printing money, which we did. This bill, they stopped circulating it in 2013, but still the notion of, oh, we are printing money, and then all the associations that this bill has personally to him, because the imagery of this bill relates to the state of Michoacán, where his family comes from, where the Purépecha Indians live. His parents are descendants, his descendants from this indigenous group, and has the imagery of the monarch butterflies that migrate, the Pátzcuaro Lake, where they fish these endemic species, and unfortunately everything is threatened because of the ecological problems, overpopulation, overexploitation of the water. But he says, you know, we always take the money for what is worth, and we don't realize all the effort that is put into producing these bills. So they have also a very high aesthetic value and can communicate many other things, but we just take for granted their stamp value. We also had a nice collaboration, and we are collaborating in a new project with Alex Israel. And, you know, he always references, you know, the Southern California pop culture. Here we see his self-portrait, you know, with this light, you know, of the actors, and very archetypical, the glasses, sunburn, you know, the California song, which he always refers to that, you know, life in Los Angeles. And he wanted the prints to look like an object, which this is what it became. We also collaborated with Jonas Wood, and, you know, this very nice set of prints, you know, we use those xenon colors to create the sense of depth. We also have done some fabrication in metal, like this cast copper relief by Robert Graham as Southern California sculpture, George Segal. We did this great project with Jonathan Borowski that used to be on our gallery in West Hollywood. Another fabrication with Frank Stella. Now, let me go because I see the time is going fast. Now I am going to talk about the technique and how we developed the project. So I am going to talk about this project by Analia Saban, where she used some clothing labels as the motif, repurposing in different ways. and, you know, taking them out of context to create notions of, you know, intimacy, something that is close, again, commerce, as you see, design in France, made in China, the value of things. So in this case, she, in the image to the left for both prints, we made a scan of the label and enlarged it to the size she wanted. Then we, in order to create a model, because we need a surface with texture to create the print, we embroidered the pieces of cloth, you know, with different patterns, different fonts, each one different, to give each label its own, let's say, personality. So, and from that model, we create a printing plate, and to the right, you see the finished proof, you know, where we added, you know, a stain, and we made them all fried, you know, is to make, to convey the idea of being used where, you know, we never pay attention to them really, maybe once when we buy clothes, but they are really close to us, and all of these things happen to them during time. Here we see Annalie and myself working, preparing the model, fixing it before we print. And also we've been honored to collaborate with Jacob Hashimoto already for 2 projects. He's at the shop working on his first project, you know, laying out the kites for, and this is the technique for that he's known to use. And we are going to show you a video of how we make a print, basically. So you will see, it's not exactly this print, but this is a print of this series. But what is different from these prints is that he used the strings as the main motif to create the image, not the kites. In his projects, the string is used mainly to support the kites, you know, on the panel. Here, the string became the main element, and of course, he integrated some kites. So basically, you are going to see how we ink a printing plate, then how we make the paper, and how it runs through the press. And we had to do a video because in order to print a print like this, it takes us a whole day. So it couldn't happen during this presentation. So this is like a shortened version of, let's say, 1 day at the workshop. So, oh, by the way, this is the print. Okay, let's do the video.
That was great. So we have many questions, and I wanted to let you know that if we're not able to get to all of your questions during this hour, you are welcome to email milo@mixografia.com. That's MILO@mixografia.com. You can also find them, of course, on Artsy if you have more questions than we're able to answer. So right now we're moving into the studio with Shaye.
So let's go to the workshop. We'll do a quick tour, so follow me. Well, this is the workshop. We are, of course, developing some projects, but I will go again through what you saw really quick, because we have a few minutes. Well, this is Edgar working on a print again by, as you see, the Jacob and his thinking. So basically, is you can see the process goes by layering the inks on the plate to create all the effects, and that this is the operation that takes the most time, the inking, and it's very intricate, and that's why sometimes it takes us a day just to make one print. You can see some of the tools that we use, but we say if it works, we use anything as long as it works, but rollers, brushes of different types, dabbers, Q-tips. So well, this is happening here. I can show you another project we are working on. This is by Alex Israel. So we have Rodrigo preparing the yellow ink for the yellow version of Desperado, which we just got his approval for the project. So now we are getting started with the production. Also, this is a print we will start working soon by Alison. This is just the relief. We were working on it, but then COVID started and she hasn't been in the shop. So hopefully in the next few months we will finish, but at least you can see the surface of the print. Here we have Ubaldo Munoz, about to melt the paper. This is another plate of Jacob's. And you can see this is the pulp we use, it's 100% cotton, and has some buffering agents. I can get technical about all these things, but this is really what it takes to make paper, and we use all this machinery to this is the paper making of operation. So sometimes we make the paper directly on the plate, or sometimes we make it and then place it on top of the plate, depending on how complicated the surface of the print is. So this is the wet area. So after we are done making the paper, as you saw, we have two presses. You saw the large press operating. Basically, is similar. It's a roller press. The upper roller presses the blankets against the paper, and the paper against the plate. And because of the pressure, the paper picks up the color and surface from the printing plate. And basically that's the way the technical way that the surface on the paper is created. So yeah, this is basically the workshop. Then after we print, we dry, and let's go to our gallery. And now, because of the COVID situation, we are using some of that space for drying the Jacob's prints, which are really large. So we air dry, we make these racks with plywood, but basically we put weight on the edges of the print to keep some tension, and we want them to dry flat. Otherwise, you know, the paper, it shrinks in different ways, especially our paper, which is very thick, it's really unforgiving, and it gets totally deformed if we don't tension it. And now to finish, well, these are all the prints that we put in the fair. As you see, everything relates to textiles, to string. I already talked about all these prints. Somewhat, this is the Analia's, the whole project of the label. And you see each one.
Shaye, can I ask a question?
Sure.
I'm going to go back to the beginning. We had a really good question about how you were able to make paper that was stronger than commercial paper.
Okay. Well, we started making the paper because the commercial paper, and that doesn't mean that it's of bad quality, of course, but has to do with the thickness of it. And also, the commercial paper is very rigid. So despite moistening it, if you have a very thick texture, it will burst. So by making our own paper, we make the paper conform to the shape of the print. So that's why we make the paper. So it conforms perfectly to the surface of the print. And that's why it's not that it's stronger, which I'm sure it is because it's thicker, but it's more about shaping the paper. That's the important thing of our homemade paper. I don't know if that answers the question.
I think it does.
Okay. Second question.
Okay, I will stay on the paper topic. We had a really interesting question about the contents of the paper. Do all of the prints use a paper-based substrata? And for conservation and archival purposes, are there any unique or unusual additives to the paper that require special care?
Well, absolutely. I think we want to make a paper that has longevity and archival properties. So the technical answer, we do buffer our paper, which means that we use an alkaline substance to keep it on that side of the pH, so it doesn't acidify, because acid is what breaks the fibers of the paper. So by adding a buffering agent, if there is an acidic environment close to the paper, then it neutralizes it. And the other thing we added has a sizing agent, which helps us with the production, but also, you know, like doesn't allow the paper to absorb that fast humidity that also helps in the preservation. And we filter our water, and we use clean fiber. So we try to, we keep everything as clean as possible.
Great.
But the main thing is the buffering agent. archival purposes.
Excellent. There was a question about the Tamayo litho stone. Wondering how many stones of that scale exist today and if it will always be preserved with Tamayo's print image on it and never used again.
Well, as far as we know, there is one, and this is it. We haven't used it. We haven't done lithography in many years. And our plan is to archive it, and that's what we've done. We could, of course, grind the stone and produce another image in theory, but mainly our print making efforts are geared towards what I would call strict mixographia, because we think that this allows the artist to experiment in a more diverse way, you know, by creating three-dimensional images, by using materials, objects, you know, anything that is solid we could use to create a print. So this allows the artist to do different things that probably they couldn't do with the more traditional printing techniques.
Perfect. We have many questions about the collaborative process. I think we have time for just one more. So sort of in broad terms, a request to share more about the collaborative process. Do you normally approach the artist with a project in mind, or is it the other way around?
Well, what we, let's say, bring to the table is, let's say, the possibility of doing a mixographia, you know, because we have the tools, the equipment, the experience doing this type of prints. So we give the artist the possibility of using the techniques. But at the end of the day, what we are looking is for the artist to provide a concept which will translate into a piece of paper with a surface. This is the way we see how we operate. And I think when we have an artist with a very good concept and we as a workshop do a good execution of it, is when you really have a great print. You know, you can have a great concept, but if it's not executed well, then it gets diluted. You know, or I say, if you have a bad concept but very well executed, then maybe it's special effects of sorts, you know. So the best is really when there is a really good understanding of what needs to happen and what's the role of between us and the artist. And, you know, we always try to make the best out of it. We are not very prolific. Our projects take a very, very long time to produce, you know, a lot of time, lots of effort. So we try to do as much as we can, you know, the best of it conceptual wise, and doing our job as printers and publishers as well.
Perfect. I think that's a beautiful place to stop. Shaye and Milo, thank you so much for this amazing program. If you have other questions, if you want to contact Shaye or Milo has generously shared his email, which is milo@mixografia.com. And of course, you can also contact them through Artsy. So thank you all very much. Thank you everyone for coming. Take care.
And also I want to thank everybody for joining us in this tour of the workshop. And hopefully one day you can come and visit. That's it. Great.